Today is a big day, engineers. You get to make your own bridge just like an engineer would in the real world. Engineers solve problems, and we're going to solve the problem of how we're going to span this big gap between these books with a bridge. You already know a lot about bridges. You know different types of bridges. You know the forces that act on bridges. You even know why some of those bridges fail. You need to rely on that knowledge when you're designing your own bridge. Science knowledge and creativity is what really makes an engineer an awesome job. So, let's start with step 1 of our process. Number 1, we're going to define the problem. The problem we want to solve today is we want to make a bridge that spans this gap. Now, I'm going to define the problem for you, just like the real world defines problems for engineers. They have a river that's so wide, or they have another highway that they want to go over top of. They need to solve the problem based on what that problem is. So here's the problem I want you to solve. Your bridge has to cover 15 inches. That's about 40 centimeters. So 15 inches between these two books. The abutments of your bridge, the edges of your bridge, need to be about 4 inches tall. So your bridge needs to be 4 inches above the water, make-believe water, and it needs to span 15 inches across. The next step in the engineering design process is defining the limitations and constraints. A lot of times the limitations and constraints for an engineer are defined by things like their boss, or things like the amount of money that they have to spend, or whoever they're working for. If they're working for a private citizen trying to build a house or a giant high-rise building for a company. I'm going to be placing the limitations and constraints on you today so that we can define what a fail in the bridge is, define the types of materials that you get to use, the time you get to use, and the cost of those materials. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what does it mean to fail? So your bridge needs to be 4 inches above the water. If your bridge dips down 2 inches, we're going to consider that a fail. Even if it doesn't crash and burn into the water, it dips down over 2 inches, we're going to call that a fail. So you need to see how much load you can put on it before it gets to dropping 2 inches. Another constraint that I want to put on you is the amount of time that you have to do this. You only got about 2 days, or until the next lesson, in order to make this part of the bridge. The last limitation I want to put on you are materials. The materials that you can use for this include paper, index cards, both large or small, string, paper clips, straws, tape, and then we're going to use pennies as our weight to determine how much load we can put on there. These are the only materials that you can use. Also, we want to make our bridge as efficiently as possible. Cost efficient, that is. We want to make our bridge cheap, and yet it still has to withstand the specs of not dropping 2 inches. So every piece of material that you use comes with a cost. This is outlined later on your worksheet. These are the limitations and constraints that you need to work under. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher or contact me. All right, so we've got our limitations and constraints. We know what the problem is. It's time to use our imagination to come up with an idea that we think we can do to solve the problem. So take some time in order to draw up how you would make this bridge. Think about the different types of bridges that you've used. Think about those bridges that failed in the previous lesson. What were some things that you can do to make those better so that this bridge will hold more load? Take some time on a sheet of paper and draw up your first schematic for your bridge. When you're done with that, start this video back up again and we'll talk about what to do next. Now that you have your first idea for your bridge, it's time to share that with others. Go ahead and paste that into the document so I can see what it looks like and your teacher can see what it looks like. But I really want you to share it with somebody near you. Share it with a parent or a brother and sister, or maybe you have a friend that you can share it with. Share that picture and get some feedback from that person. Engineers always work in groups. They very rarely, if ever, work alone. So this is a very important step in the engineering design process. Once you get feedback from that person, you're going to draw a new schematic. This schematic should take into account the feedback that you got from that person, or several people would be great. In your second drawing, I want you to really think about what are those materials that you're going to use. How are you going to fasten things together? Each of those materials are going to cost something. On your worksheet, there is a spreadsheet that talks about the material, the cost that it is per item, and then you can calculate the total cost based on how many you want to use. Yeah, you can use 800 straws in order to make your bridge really, really strong and really, really stable, but that's not going to be very cost effective. So you want to use as minimum materials as possible and still have it work. Go ahead and get feedback from somebody, make a second drawing, and calculate your materials. In the next lesson, we're going to move forward and actually start building some stuff.